Welcome to episode 23 of Anchored in Education. I'm E. Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. I was reading an article from The Atlantic recently that talked about the trends of the teacher workforce. This particular article, published in February of 2019, was looking at gender composition in teaching. It looked back to the 1880s, where women made up 63% of the country's teachers, though at that time, and continuing until the late 1970s, high schools were taught by a majority of men. It was around this time in the 70s that women began pursuing different career paths, such as physicians, which saw a rise from 10% in 1973 to 40% in 2018, and lawyers, 4% in the 70s up to 63% in 2018. The number of women majoring in teaching has also dropped to 11%, down from around 35% in the 1970s. Now, I can personally relate to this. Looking back at my educational career, kindergarten, Mrs. Harpster; first grade, Mrs. Kazel; second grade, Mrs. Stone; third grade, Mrs. Van Buren; fourth grade, Mrs. Schutz; fifth grade, Mrs. Owens; sixth grade, Miss Niesler. It wasn't until seventh grade before I had my first male teacher. While all of this is interesting, this is not the gender divide I'm interested in today. That same Atlantic article points to half of today's principals being male, with 2/3 of that population serving high school. And when it comes to superintendents, more than 3/4 are men. Thankfully, education has tremendous leaders such as Dr. Courtney Orzel. Courtney is the superintendent of a suburban district southwest of Chicago. She was recently a finalist for the National Women in Leadership Award presented by the American Association for School Administrators. She can routinely be found speaking on how great educators support, encourage, and grow women leaders. And she has also been at the forefront in her home state, leading the IASA Super Women Initiative. Courtney, welcome to Anchored in Education.
Thank you.
Hey, before we get started into the wonderful things that you've got going on with Women in Leadership movement here, can we find out a little bit more about you and how you became anchored in education?
Sure. So I always wanted to be a teacher, quite honestly. It's something that I dreamed about when I was a little girl. And then I had an awesome math teacher in middle school named Mr. Hendricks, who unfortunately recently just passed away. And he really inspired me to become a teacher. So I went to college. I was a first-generation college student, and I really had a lot of inspiration along the way and people who took chances on me. I started my career as a middle school English teacher in Riverside 96. From there, Linda Yankee took a chance on me at York High School, and I became a high school English teacher. And then Doug Wood took a chance on me at Gower Middle School, and that was my first administrative position.
Okay.
And then from there, I became a middle school principal, and Dr. Margaret Longo, who's been a longtime mentor for me, hired me in Oak Forest, and I was a middle school principal there for 9 years, and then transitioned into the superintendency. And most recently, the District 113A Board of Education took a chance on me to be their superintendent. It'll be 6 years ago now.
6 years. And so total amount of years you have anchored in education is how many?
I've stopped counting. Over 20.
We don't,
20.
We don't have to
21.
get into the specific amount.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
But you're in your current role in the 6th year, which is the superintendent. And
yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going to get in today, because at some point, and I think it's been recent, there's been the Women in Leadership, which we're talking about today. But I think that this is more than just getting on the Women in Leadership bandwagon. This movement, from what I have found, began about 4 years ago with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And if I'm understanding correctly, the purpose of the initiative is to help mitigate the impact of social barriers that women face in ascending to the top leadership positions. So, can you share any personal struggles you experienced as you transitioned into leadership?
Sure. I mean, I began the superintendency 9 months pregnant. So that's probably something unique to my career. But when I was a new superintendent and I was 9 months pregnant, I had some people say to me, "So what are you going to do about all that?" And I said, "About all what? My baby?" And they were fascinated that I was 9 months pregnant becoming a superintendent. And I realized at that point that was certainly a social barrier for me. I've experienced age barriers. I think people think I'm younger than I am, which is but that's a blessing. I'm not.
Well, don't let's
I'm
not
not
knock
beyond
that.
that.
I have the same
Yeah,
thing.
right. I know, but I've had people say when I say I'm a superintendent, they're like, "You're too young to be a superintendent," and I don't believe that. So I think there's certainly been age barriers, gender barriers. I know when I became a superintendent, someone even said to me, "So what are they going to think when they look in the newspaper and they see your picture and they think that you're just too young to be a superintendent?" Or I've had people make comments about being blonde. I had an administrator years ago in my career tell me that I should stop getting highlights in my hair if
Really?
I wanted people to, yeah, take me seriously. So I even was featured in the Chicago Tribune as a building principal about what principals do in the summer, and they took a picture of my 5-inch heels and put that on there. And
Wow.
so I think that those things certainly exist, and to have your heels photographed and that's the message being sent, certainly I realized at that point that we had a lot of work to do in this particular area. And a lot of people think that I'm from the northern suburbs, but I'm actually a small town girl from Clinton, Illinois, and
Okay.
grew up in a very small farming community. So again, I think there's a lot of bias that exists out there, but I think it's up to us to make sure that our narrative is out there.
Absolutely, because I'm guessing through all of your administrative experience that there really hasn't been anything that 5-inch heels has done for you to make you the leader you are. But yet you're saying that's what the focus was at one point. How do you respond to that?
I respond to that in saying that um, it's up to everyone in this field to put the emphasis where the emphasis belongs. And people are going to create their own narrative. And I've always been a firm believer that it's our job to be on the forefront and sharing the important work that we do and making sure that everybody has a voice. I'm a huge proponent of public education. And I think that if we aren't out there sharing what we're doing, then people are going to create their own narratives.
Now, I came across an interesting study from the Harvard Business Review, and it looked at 16 competencies that are proven as most important to overall leadership effectiveness. And so yeah, I'm going to quote just some from this. This is the author speaking, not me. But interestingly enough, women scored higher than men in building relationships, inspiring and motivating others, practicing self development, taking initiative, and driving for results. Now, these results from that study led one of the authors to suggest that women had more competence but lacked the confidence. So I'm going to give you a quote here and see if you agree with the author's statement. Again, this isn't my quote, this is the author's, but it says, quote, "Be competent like a woman and confident and ambitious like a man." How do you agree with that?
No, no, I don't agree with that. This is what I would say. I would say you can be a competent, confident, ambitious leader, regardless of whether or not you're a man or a woman. And I think those are the stereotypes that we need to break out of, because I know a lot of competent, ambitious men and women leaders, and those are all great qualities to have, regardless of your gender.
Oh, sure. Well, I think I know. I was thinking that this was probably a response when I read that, and I thought it was a bold statement to begin with.
Yeah.
But I've seen confident and ambitious men that I don't want to be led by. I mean, so it's a very vague statement that I think, again, it keeps us in these stereotypes, which is what we're trying to kind of break down. And it's something that you're clearly passionate about, as you have taken the lead on several state here in Illinois and national initiatives. So, uh, can you tell us a little bit more about your mission and vision in transitioning more women into leadership?
Absolutely. So I think the work that we're doing is really a testament to Dr. Brent Clark, our executive director of the Illinois Association of School Administrators. He's the one that created the space for us to get together and talk about this important topic. And it really has taken off from there. So I think part of our mission and vision is that we all have a responsibility to grow our profession. We know that we have a disproportionate number of female administrators versus how many we have as teachers, but women, just like men, need encouragement, and women need to see others like them, whether it be in the superintendency or just in leadership roles, just like men do too. And so men really play a critical role. This is really never, our mission and vision has always been the idea that we are all in this together, and that is not about men versus women in any way, shape, or form. Men play a really critical role to getting women into leadership roles. And women will tell you many times, just like men that have inspired me and taken a chance on me in my career, that we need men and women to see the best in us to help us grow and succeed as leaders.
Well, and that is one thing I have noticed about the IASA Superwomen is that the support is not just from the female educators. There was a Twitter chat last year, and I think it was a soup chat, one of the Wednesday nights, that was dedicated to talking about the Superwomen. I could be wrong on that, but I think it was the soup chat. But
Yep.
there's many male educators supporting the efforts and getting more women into leadership roles. So share with us how we can all support, encourage, and grow women leaders.
Yeah, I love that question. So it sounds so trivial and simple, but the reality is this. It really comes down to seeing people in your own organizations and saying, have you ever thought about being a building principal? Or have you ever thought about the superintendency? Because I see you in that role. If you look at the research, Scott, it's very clear for men and for women, but particularly for women, that someone in their life, whether it be a spouse, someone in their family, it could be just a principal, another leader in the organization, said to them, have you ever thought about this? I think you can do it. And then they go out and do it. I mean, it's really, really that simple. I just don't think that we're being as intentional as we could be with that.
Sure.
And we're not really creating the spaces to be able to do that. So our mission for IASA Superwomen is to grow, support, encourage. And, yes, we've done the Twitter chats. We have a great network. We've done book talks. We've had podcasts on it, but all of these voices matter. And so my message is always, let's get out there, because if you're on Twitter and you're just watching, we can't hear you, and your voice matters.
Yeah, and every voice matters. And I think that something else that I've noticed is that Illinois ISA has really, you said Dr. Brent Clark has opened up the space to to provide the platform. But I noticed the fourth year of the Aspiring Superintendent Academy this year, you are now a part of that, and I think that it's important that for these aspiring superintendents that they see what a well balanced leadership across their state looks like. Which Mike and Nick are great. I was a former aspiring superintendent academy, but you had that opportunity. How was that?
It was incredible. Mike and Nick were wonderful. Dr. Clark supported that as well, and it really. I wish I would have had that before I became a superintendent. It is a mini boot camp for superintendents. The cohort was amazing. And the power of that is that you come out of there being a better leader for whatever role that you currently hold. And Mike and Nick have done an incredible job, and I was very grateful to be a part of that this past year.
Now, how about the participants of that? Were you happy with what you saw? Did you see a lot of aspiring female superintendents there?
I sure did. I saw a lot of aspiring superintendents. male and female. And I will tell you that I think we had um, a pretty balanced male-female participant base this year in particular. So I was really excited to see that, but just really incredible leaders in that room. They're a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
That's great news to hear for the profession in Illinois, and I'm hoping that our listeners that's outside of the borders can understand just how, like you said, at some point it becomes very simple to make your voice heard, and you cannot. It's very hard to advocate silently. You have to be vocal about this. Now,
Yeah.
I think something else that is important to point out that while we talk about women in leadership, we've talked about principals and superintendents or some other building or district level position, but it goes beyond that. We could also be talking about women serving on boards of education. So, what advice could you give a potential board member on how to make a difference in our schools?
Sure. I mean, women board members are phenomenal as well. I do not make secret of the fact that I love my Board of Education in Lamont. And I will tell you that the first board president that I had in Lamont was a female, Cindy Kelly. And one of the things I will tell you is this: when my son was turning 7, I had called her and said, any chance that I can bring Nolan in and we can have this mini party before the board meeting, because it was his birthday and it was on a Wednesday. And she said, absolutely not. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, we're rescheduling the board meeting. You only turn 7 once, and
wow.
Nolan needs to spend that night with his mom. And so I believe any of my board members would have done that, male or female. But I'm telling you that, our female board members, I have a teacher, Bethany Martino, on my board, and I have Cindy Kelly. And each board member provides such a unique perspective, but they're really balanced and they listen very well to each other. But I've been very blessed for great boards of education for both men and women. But I do know that there's a lot of situations too that women face barriers trying to get in because of the perceptions and the social barriers that we've talked about earlier, though.
They do, and that's why the question kind of came to mind, because as I look at districts throughout, and not just Illinois, but beyond, that the majority of boards are usually 7 members, and you're usually looking at 5 or more, sometimes all 7, that are men. And they may be great boards. I'm definitely not knocking that, but you talk about that balance, and we've heard it several times throughout, that you have to have the different perspectives and the balance to be able to, I think, serve our teachers and our students.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I'm also thinking, Scott, that we probably have some work to do in the area of school board training and what are school board members actually seeing with that. I know that my board and I present at almost all of the joint annual conferences, and it's not uncommon after that to have a male board member in another school district come up to me and be mesmerized that I was a female superintendent doing some presentations. So again,
Wow.
How do we really get ourselves out there in front of everyone to show that we're all doing really good work? So I think there's still some opportunities for us in general with that.
It seems like as we approach 2020, that should be a question that no longer is coming up. I mean, it would be very difficult for my response not to be, why wouldn't I be presenting? Whenever
Correct.
Whenever you're asked that question. So now you've talked about this a little bit, but you play an active role on social media. So how has Twitter helped play a role activating the women in leadership message?
Well, Lindsay Hall and Carrie Ruby and I have been moderating the Twitter chats for IESA Superwomen and really trying to share that collective message. And we're connecting with women and men all around the country to do great work. And I think one of the things that I've noticed out of that is that people just reaching out randomly and saying, I don't know you, but I feel like I know you through Twitter. And I saw you post about this with your administrative retreat. Can you give me some more information on that? So again, it does come down to you have to get yourself out there. And I've always been a huge proponent that Twitter is a very, very powerful resource for all of us as educators and connects us across the world. So the more that we can do that, the better. And I'm encouraging, women when I am talking to them and they ask me about Twitter, sometimes it's just a matter of doing a quick little tutorial for 5 to 10 minutes on TweetDeck or getting yourself out there. How do you really do a chat? And then once they do it, they're accustomed to it and they can get out there. So I just keep encouraging them that we need to hear you. I know you're watching, but we need to hear from everybody.
Absolutely, and I think I've seen that you've done several workshops and podcasts and everything on the benefits of social media, and it's important to get those new teachers. So is that one of the things when you're bringing new teachers into your district? Do you kind of introduce them if they're not familiar with it at that time?
We do. So all of our teachers have Twitter accounts. We don't require them to use them, but I'd say close to 70% actively use Twitter. And so part of our new teacher orientation is that we take them through what that looks like. And we know that Twitter is not where our parents are per se. Some are, but most aren't. So what we do is we curate those tweets and then we push those out on Facebook because that's where the majority of our parents are. So really Twitter is more the professional development resource for staff. And then we can also utilize that and take it and give a window into what's happening in our classrooms for our families when we push that out on Facebook.
And hashtag SD113A is your district hashtag, I believe.
Yes, thanks for the shout out.
Absolutely. We're definitely giving you a shout out there, and we're going to, because we're talking about Twitter, we're going to talk about a Twitter chat that you co-moderate, which is hashtag ILEdChat, and that's the first Monday of each month. But this chat is not just for those from Illinois. You've got educators from all over the country participating. Can you give us an idea of some topics we could expect from this popular monthly chat?
Sure. There's a great group of people behind this. John Bartelt is really leading the charge with this, along with some other district leaders. But some upcoming topics would be equity, mental health, social and emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, educator resilience. And so we are always looking for additional chat topics that would be of interest. And so if you have any, just contact either me or John Bartelt, or just utilize the hashtag and put your ideas out there, and we will certainly take those into consideration.
All right, and that is hashtag ILEdChat. And you can get on, and you threw a shout out there to John. Whether you pronounce it GIF or GIF, I believe he is the king of those.
He truly is the king of that, Scott. I'm sure that he'd be very impressed that you mentioned that.
I think,
but yes, he is.
It's tough to bring up the Illinois Ed Chat and not point that out. So, Courtney, before we go, for those who already follow you on Twitter, one well-documented fact is that you are a fan of Justin Timberlake. And so I am 100% with you right there. I've reached out to his publicist before trying to get him to collaborate on a district project that I had going on. So it didn't work out, but I'm right there with you. So as I look at the Illinois Ed Chat, I believe many are trying to help you get his attention during this chat. And in your opinion, is there anything we can do to help get JT to weigh in on education?
Well, my love of Justin Timberlake started a long time ago. My friend Kim and I, we were big NSYNC fans, so this goes way back. Hopefully, I'm not going to have a restraining order against me at some point, right? But
I'll be right there with you.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you read the book that he just wrote, Hindsight, and he talks about who he is and where he came from and the importance of being present and humble. And now he's a dad, so he talks about all this different perspective. And we kind of make light of that, and wouldn't it be really cool to get Justin Timberlake to weigh in? I mean, it certainly would. But at the end of the day, I think the reality for all of us is we're all human. We've all experienced education. It's something that's common for all of us. And so, for me, it's just another great example of we can make light of it, but it's pretty cool to see a lot of people trying to rally around just the concept of education. Because like I said before, there's nothing better and greater than public education. And so, the most important thing that we can do is remember that we're all in this together, regardless if you're Justin Timberlake or you're Scott England.
That's
or,
right.
Whoever. I mean, we are all in this together. So that's been kind of fun, and I've enjoyed seeing seeing people try. So hey, all we can do is keep trying, right, Scott?
Hey, I am going to keep trying right there with you, and I'm not going to quit singing or dancing no matter how much my friends and my family beg me to. So,
Okay, fair enough.
Courtney, thank you so much for joining us on Anchored in Education today.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Seriously, you should follow Courtney on Twitter today. Search at Dr. Orzel to find her. Or head over to escottengland.com and click on the Read More link to read more about Courtney and find a link to her there. I also have the articles I've referenced available for you to read as well. Now, before I close out today's episode, I want to again encourage you to subscribe to Anchored in Education so you can be notified every time a new episode is available. The topic today is one of high importance. It is important in education that we provide well-rounded and balanced views and opinions as we approach teaching and learning. We cannot do that with an imbalanced workforce. It is important to open up this conversation for both those in and out of education, because I've seen this firsthand in my career. When I tell someone I am a superintendent, they just nod like, of course you are. But when I tell those same people that I used to teach first grade, I always get the arching eyebrows. Which, if I refer back to that Atlantic article, it reported that 9 out of 10 elementary educators are women. We've got some work to do. I think it is just important to have women as superintendents as it is to have men in pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. We need to take a sledgehammer to the stereotypes that say who should teach and lead what. Because at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education.